Доброго вечора. Welcome to the Shevchenko Scientific Society. Tonight we have pre-launch reading from the God of Freedom by Yuliya Musakovska, translated by Olena Jennings. We have two brilliant guests, and now I read that bio of Yuliya and Olena. Yuliya Musakovska is an award-winning Ukrainian poet and translator. She was born in 1982, Lviv, Ukraine, where she lives and works. She has published 5 poetry collections in Ukrainian, among them Hunting for Silence, 2014, Men, Women and Children, 2015, and The God of Freedom, 2021. Shortlisted for the Lviv UNESCO City Literature Prize and included to the top 8 nominees for the Taras Shevchenko National Prize. She received many literary awards in Ukraine, including Small Scale Prize for Poetry 2010. Her work has been translated into over 30 languages and widely published around the globe. Her poem appeared at Southern Review, AGNI, Tupelo, Quarterly, The Common and others journals. Olena Jennings, the author of the poetry collection The Age of Secrets, 2022, and chapbook Memory Project. Her novel Temporary Shelter was released in 2021 from Chervena Barva Press. She is a translator of Katerina Kalitko's Nobody Knows Us Here and We Don't Know Anyone, 2022, together with Oksana Lutseshina and my book Paper Bridge, 2022. She was shortlisted for the Ukrainian Literature in Translation Prize 2023 for her translation of Yuliya Musakovska poetry. Olena is also the founder and curator of Poets of Queens Reading Series and Press. Please start.
All right. Thank you for that introduction, Vasyl. First, I'll start by talking a little bit about how I met Yuliya, and that was at the Lviv Book Forum in 2018. We were at a party that was an opening party for the forum, and we started talking, and she gave me her book, Men, Women, and Children, and I read it, and I was very interested in the poetry. And I even wrote a poem that was inspired by one of the poems that she later translated. And so when a mutual friend of ours was in Ukraine, he came back with the book, The God of Freedom, and I read it, and I also was very enamored with the poems. And it was then in late 2021 that we started talking about translating together. So I had suggested translating some poems, and then Yuliya suggested acting as my co-translator to fill in all the gaps and make it a complete collection. So we started the first poem before the full-scale invasion began, and war is a key topic in many of the poems. So we're going to start by reading one poem after Yuliya speaks a little.
Okay, yeah. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my second time here at Taras Shevchenko Scientific Society in New York. I remember my visit in 2015 here, reading from my then forthcoming collection, Men, Women, and Children, and receiving a warm welcome here. Appreciate it, and it's nice to be here again with this new collection that was translated by Olena with a little of my help, and of course when we met there at the book forum, the book fair in Lviv, I already knew a lot about Olena. I was familiar with her brilliant translator work, with the translations of Vasyl Makhno's poetry and translations of Irina Shuvalova, and also Natalka Bilocerkivets, who is one of my very favorite key poets. So it was an honor to get to know Olena, and I was really happy that she liked my poetry and she got interested in translating it. We have started working on the first poems. I remember it was several days before the full-scale invasion, and we finalized this very first poem on the evening of February 23rd, 2022. And this collection, it's as Vasyl already mentioned, was published in 2021 by the Old Line Publishing, but it's basically before the full-scale invasion. But we all know that the war started in 2014, and it was since then that it has become one of the key topics of my poetry. And so this book has a lot about war. It addresses the topic of war, of course, in a different manner than now we Ukrainian poets write about it, but still. I remember we had this poem, we finalized it, and then when the invasion began, of course, we in Ukraine, we focused more on the practical matters, of course, when the full-scale invasion erupted. The most important, the key priorities were to take care of your family, your friends, and help those who were going to the front line to find the ammunition, to take care of those who were forcibly displaced. So these were the most important matters. But still, while we in Ukraine were trying to focus on survival, our friends abroad were trying to show their help and their solidarity, their support for Ukraine. So PEN America organized a Zoom reading, and they asked us to read some of the translated poems, and I remember reading this first one in the collection that we already translated. Because my previous poetry was also, some of it was translated into English by a UK-based translator, William Blacker and Olesa Khromenchuk, and also by Anatoly Kudryavitsky, who is based in Dublin. But I really thought that this freshly translated poem would be a good choice for that event. And then we were invited to publish it in the Boston-based AGNI journal, and it was featured there, opening the issue together with the Robert Pinsky's poem. So it was really a sign of support, and it was very moving to get that support from our friends in the U.S. And it is also the very first poem in the collection. And we are going to start by reading. I will read in the original, and then I'll ask Olena to read in English. Така любов, що аж у горлі клубок гарячий, без будь-яких напівтонів чи відносних значень, не у півсерця, а цілим сонцем і морем. Так гіацинтово, фіалково і безумовно. Така розхристана та надсадна, як ранок ранній. Така разюча, незрозуміло, гоїть чи ранить. Така обіцяна, зм'яклі коліна, розбитий панцир. як довгожданна, але навмисне пропущена станція, як гуркіт, і голос, який втішає: гроза, гроза, як вуличний музикант, зарізаний на підзамчі, як протаранені кораблі, обмілілі ріки, як 155 дітей без батьківської опіки, як назви втрачених місць, які не втомишся промовляти, як благодать найвища та найгірше прокляття, як чорна трава, спопелілі гнізда і шепіт пустки, така любов, що вросла і ніколи вже не відпустить.
Such love it is, a hot lump in your throat. It is without any half-tones or relative meanings, loved not half-heartedly, but with the full sun and sea. It is loved hyacinth-like, violet-like, and unconditionally. It is so uncovered and raw like an early morning. It is so striking you can't tell if it heals or wounds. It has been promised your knees go weak and your armor is broken. It is like a long-awaited train stop that you missed on purpose. It is like a roar and a voice amidst it saying, it's just a thunderstorm. It's like a street musician that has been slaughtered at Pizamche. It is like ram boats in rivers that have gone shallow, like 155 children deprived of their father's care, like the names of the lost places which you are never tired of saying, like the highest grace and the worst curse, like the black grass bird's nest turned to ashes and the whisper of the void. Such love it is which has grown deep into you and will never let go.
So this poem, it starts off as if it is about some personal romantic affection, but then closer to the end we all understand it's about a different kind of love. And there are things that are pretty factual in this poem. For example, the musician who was killed at Pizamche, which is basically not a dangerous place. It's an industrial district in Lviv. And it was also someone whom I knew from my teenage years. And the fact that it happened, for me, it seemed like an omen of something very bad coming. And also the number of children, 155 children, those were the children of Crimean activists, Crimean Tatar activists whose fathers were illegally imprisoned by Russian occupier force. And I'm sure that at this moment there are many more, unfortunately, many more children who are deprived of their father's care. So in the first weeks of the invasion, we have noticed that there's this huge interest in Ukrainian literature, Ukrainian poetry, and the thing with poetry is that it is it is easier to handle. It is easier to translate because it's a shorter form, and many people around the world were trying to show their solidarity by picking up the Ukrainian poems, especially the poems about the war, and translating it into different languages. So, for example, I could wake up in the morning, of course, if the night allowed for sleep, because we used to have many of the air raid alerts, and sometimes the nights were sleepless. But nevertheless, in the morning, you could look at the social media and suddenly find your poem translated to, let's say, Estonian or Romanian or Vietnamese or many different languages. And I think at the moment it's over 30 languages that these poems were translated to. This was coming from the desire of the world to understand what it's like, what this war is like, what it feels like to live through these horrible events. And of course, poetry is sharply emotional, and it brings the experience of living through these atrocities closer to the reader. So, you know, at that moment, there was already a great deal of poems about the war that started in 2014. So, so we decided to proceed with this project and decided to finalize this translation. So we also found that these poems were kind of a tool to use in our fight in some sense. For example, there are poems in this collection that are destroying the harmful Russian narratives. And we are going to read one for you and then make maybe a short comment afterwards. We will read the Garden of Bones, but I will start by reading in Ukrainian. Oh, I didn't make a bookmark for that one, so sorry about that. I will take a minute to find it. Yeah. Що в мішку торохкотить? Кості. Кості мої, та не всі. 3 кісточки братик вийняв. 2 на ринку продав, 1 на городі прикопав. Виросте з тої кістки яблуня. Кожне яблуко з обличчям моїм буде до братика промовляти. Завіщо ти мене, старший братику? Завіщо ти мене вбив? Кісточки з мене вийняв, грубою ниткою зашив, у мішок поклав, 3 дні поховати не дав. За те, що в тебе жінка гарніша, пісня гучніша, земля масніша, яблуня на подвір'ї вища. Віддай мені землю свою, жінку свою, пісню свою вузлом впоперек горла зав'яжи. Не брат мені ти, не ворог чесний, не чоловік, не звір. Мішок набитий кістьми. Вийде твоя жінка, вкусить яблучка, впаде замертво. Вийдуть твої діти, вкусять і впадуть неживі. Вийде сонце, спалить твою хату дотла, засіє попелом землю. Що в мішку торохкотить? Яблука солодкі.
Garden of Bones. What's rattling in the sack? Bones. My bones, but not all of them. My brother stole 3 bones. He sold 2 of them at the market and buried 1 in his garden. An apple tree will grow from that bone. Each apple with my face will speak to my brother. What did you do this? for, older brother? What did you kill me for? Taking the bones from my body, sewing it shut with a coarse thread. Put me into a sack. Don't let them bury me for 3 days. It is because your wife is prettier. Your song is louder. Your soil is richer. The apple tree in your garden is taller. Give me your wife, your land. Tie your knot in your throat. You're not a brother to me, not an honest enemy, not a man, not a beast, a sack full of bones. Your wife will come outside and take a bite of an apple. She will fall dead. Your children will come out. They will take a bite and fall lifeless. The sun will rise and burn your house to the ground, sowing the land with ashes. What's rattling in the sack? Apples, so very sweet.
So this is, of course, a story about two brothers, but it's actually about this fake narrative that Russia has created and is using about the brotherhood of nations, which is only a pretext for colonization of the neighboring countries. So this is a way to explain that this is in no way a family matter as such, and that we are not brothers, and this is a very harmful narrative that is currently and still used by Russia. And I think this is one of the poems that got most interest and was translated into most languages, and it was I recently had maybe it was last year I got a message from an Italian composer who wanted to compose a music piece to this poem, and it was performed in Italy as a recital, not a song, but with the music of this Italian composer, and performed by a Ukrainian soprano who is currently residing in Italy. So it was very symbolic in a way. Yeah.
Okay, so the book in general is based around the concept of freedom and the moments when freedom is challenged. Sometimes it's in a personal relationship, and then it becomes bigger and becomes about independence and one's homeland. And so it shows that freedom is at the core of Ukrainian mentality. In general, the poems speak about relationships, family, friendship, home, health, and the desire for growth amidst all these difficult circumstances and under the threat of war.
I was actually analyzing in a way of how freedom can be challenged, how it can be limited in different circumstances. For example, when a child is growing up and has all these aspirations and all these skills that he or she is could develop, and of course the desire to fulfill himself or herself, and sometimes this gets limited by the family because they have their different expectations. So this is a way in which a freedom can be affected, and then a freedom in a relationship when people become codependent and they try to sort of accustom to each other, but sometimes they let go of their personal wishes. And even with a situation with health, when the person is being treated, and this is some kind of serious treatment that is makes someone confined to a hospital, then you also feel trapped, and you also kind of lose a part of your freedom. And the poems in the collection, they address all these kinds of situations. And of course, the most grand situation is what we have right now with the war, when our country existence is in danger and freedom is being limited in many different ways. And of course, the worst thing is what happens on the occupied territories, as we call them, the temporarily occupied territories, which Russians have taken from Ukraine. And this is probably the worst that can happen, because the degree of the crimes that Russians are committing to Ukrainian citizens, it cannot be described. Of course, when some of the territories were liberated after, for example, Russians were pushed away from the Kiev region, and the entire world saw what they left behind. The mass murders, the places of mass burials, and we have the testimonies of the people from the occupied territories who were liberated, of all the degrees of torture and all kinds of attacks that they have experienced. So basically, the freedom is something that is very inherent to Ukrainian mentality, is something that lives deep within, and it affects everything we do. And if not for this spirit of freedom, because the God of freedom is kind of a divine force that every human being has inside, if not for this spirit of freedom, would Ukrainians have resisted? Because maybe not every nation would resist, but for us it's of course a matter of survival, but also something that we have been doing for centuries, fighting for our country's independence. So this is a very, I would say, multifaceted reflection that is happening here in the book. But we will perhaps read you several poems that address how this spirit of freedom can work in different situations. And we will start with one of the poems, the first poems here in the book. So yeah, I will read in Ukrainian, and then I'll ask Olena to read the translation.
I'll just quickly say that this poem was also published in this anthology called In the Hour of War, Poetry from Ukraine, edited by Carolyn Forche and Yuliya Kaminsky. And so that was one of the poems that they selected for the anthology.
Mm-hmm. And I must say that before the invasion, I think it was the most popular poem of mine, which got maybe most traction on different platforms. And I was always asked to read it at every reading. I think I got tired of it at some point. But I think it will be the first time that I read it here, so I should do that. Чи береш ти цього чоловіка з його загостреним відчуттям справедливості, з його розтрісканим сном, двоїстою натурою, одне обличчя оаза, а друге піщана буря, з розсипом зморщок навколо очей, коли усміхається, з головою повною складних чисел, причинно-наслідкових зв'язків, деталей, філігранної точності. Чи береш ти цього чоловіка, з яким будеш більше мовчати, ніж говорити? І це мовчання буде ціннішим від усіх розмов. Чи береш ти цього чоловіка, щоб вриватися з ним до нічних забігайлівок, знімати шкірку з яблук і торкатись тонкого вінілу в 4 роки? щоб обіймати його ногами, як стовбур дерева, розходитись, як масло під ножем, обертатись навколо своєї осі, щоб йому світити. Чи обіцяєш встромляти та витягати голки, здирати та накладати пластир, згладжувати гострі кути, не переливати молока до кави, витримувати нестерпно довгі паузи, коли обертається спиною, цілувати так жадібно, мов захлинатися водою у спеку. Чи береш ти цю жінку з її розладнаними механізмами, прихованими шрамами, колекцією сердець у кишенях сукні, оберемком незавершених справ, яких ніколи не меншає, з її дислексією, дірявою пам'яттю, прикушеною губою, з великою сумкою, в якій що завгодно і багато свободи. Чи береш ти цю жінку, щоб не читати її віршів, не читати її нотацій, сердитися на неї та проганяти її страхи, упиватися недосконалостями, що творять її довершеність, оберігати порядок дня, в якому ви разом? Чи обіцяєш ходити навшпиньках, коли вона втілює задуми, приходити миротворцем в її гарячі точки, пускатися з нею берега, вступати у суперечки і філософські диспути, ніколи не припиняючи проростати одне в одного? І в винайнятій совковій квартирі, і в тіснявій електричці, і у мансарді над батьківським домом, і у власній оселі з великими вікнами і білими стінами, і в лікарняній палаті, наповненій розпачем та надією, і в готельній кімнаті, де замість підлоги море, допоки ніщо не розлучить вас.
The vow. Do you take this man with his extreme sense of justice, with his broken sleep, his dual nature, one of his faces an oasis and the other a sandstorm, with wrinkles scattered around his eyes when he smiles, with his head full of complex numbers, casual connections, details of precise accuracy? Do you take this man to be quiet with him more often than talk, the silence being more valuable than any conversation? Do you take this man to burst into all-night diners, to peel an apple and touch a delicate vinyl record with 2 hands and 2 hands, to wrap your legs around him as if around a tree trunk, to part as butter beneath a knife, to revolve around your axis, lighting his way? Do you promise to insert and take out needles, to rip off and put on bandages, to smooth over conflicts, to not pour too much milk into his coffee, to withstand unbearably long pauses when he turns his back, to kiss as greedily as if choking on water on a hot day? Do you take this woman with her maladjusted mechanics, concealed scars, with her collection of hearts in the pockets of her dress, with her pile of errands that never get smaller, with her dyslexia, holes in her memory, her bitten lip, with her big purse that holds random items and a lot of freedom? Do you take this woman without reading her poems, without reprimanding her, to get angry with her but chase her fears away, to revel in the faults that her perfection is made of, to preserve your day's plan when you're together? Do you promise to tiptoe around when she's bringing her ideas to life, to come as a peacemaker to her hot spots, to stray from the right path with her, to enter into arguments and philosophical disputes, while never stopping to grow into each other in a rented Soviet-era apartment and on a crowded local train and in the attic of your parents' house and in your own home with large windows and white walls and in a hospital ward filled with desperation and hope and in a hotel room where the sea replaces the floor until nothing do you part.
So I have heard from several couples who have actually used this poem in their wedding vows at their weddings. So it was, of course, very moving. But this poem is not just about the romantic love, it's about self-acceptance for both men and women. So I'm going to read the next poem and then probably speak a little about it. So we'll be hatching. I wrote it for my son. Лицарю яєчної шкаралупи, моя безпомильна копія, у сучасному аранжуванні, в обробці часу та простору. Звідки в тебе стільки хоробрості, стільки нон-стопу, в цій карколомній подорожі в напрямку дорослості? В'ється зелений горошок, вгризається в огорожу. Сердиться, загинає бадилля скрипуче й старе. Хто посмів би обтяти тебе ножицями не можна? Вирівняти наважився дощечками так треба. Прапороносцю осіннього парку, золотий самозванцю. Вибухають залпи опалого листя над головою. Твій будиночок із паличок міцно стоїть, не розвалиться. Хочеш плакати? Плач. Ти ще встигнеш побути воїном. Дивишся наскрізь очима, повними горизонту. Ніч підступає, а отже місце поряд лише для найближчих. Тріскає шкаралупа. Десь у сутінковій зоні василіски вилуплюються. В дзеркалі змінюється обличчя.
Hatching. The Night of Eggshells. My unmistakable copy in a modern remix, processed by time and space. Where did you get so much courage, moving non-stop along the stunning journey towards adulthood? The green pea curls, biting into the fence, getting angry, bending old and creaky weeds. Who would dare trim you with the you cannot scissors, or straighten you up with the you must planks? The flag bearer of an autumn park, the golden imposter, look, fallen leaves are exploding in strikes above our heads. Your house of sticks is standing strong, will not fall apart. If you want to cry, then cry. The time will come to be a warrior. You pierce right through with your eyes, full of horizon. The night approaches, so only the closest ones remain near. The shell breaks. Somewhere in the zone of twilight, basilisks hatch. The face changes in the mirror.
So I wrote it for my son, and even at that moment, I think it was 2017 or 18, there was this feeling that the war that was started by Russia in the eastern parts of Ukraine would probably evolve, because from knowing our history, we know that with Russia's imperial ambitions, which they cannot fulfill without Ukraine, it would not let go. So I was thinking about how it may affect my child in the future, and of course this is a very very sad reflections of the need to become a warrior in future. But from what we now see, and from the events that are happening, and the threat that Russia is for the entire world, it might probably be the thoughts that not just mothers in Ukraine are having. Because now it's the leaders of European countries are starting to realize that this threat might be much bigger, and it might be even challenging the very existence of Europe as such. But the next poem that we will read, I will start also by reading it in the original. It is a reflection about what our Ukrainian soldiers have been going through since 2014, when many passionate young men and women volunteered to go and fight in the Donbass, fighting the Russian occupiers. And of course, where I lived in Lviv, we were not affected directly. We were far from that region, but still my friends volunteered to join the army. We have been reading the news that were happening. I remember I was deeply affected of what happened at Ilovaisk. I was following the activities of our combat medic battalion, hospitaliers, and supporting it for many years. And I was really thinking about this burden that is being borne by the soldiers that are returning home to like safe cities and trying to share their experience, and how alien that experience was to us at that moment. So that is a poem I wrote actually on a trip to Slovenia, and even going out of Ukraine, I couldn't, leave these thoughts behind. So let me read it. I think I didn't put enough bookmarks into the book.
It's around page 29.
Okay. No, it's not. I will find it. Yeah. So it's here. Війна, що її носиш у нагрудній кишені, мов лисеня прогризла в тобі дірку, з якої раз по раз вивалюється серце. Зашиваю мовчки, міцно столивши краї, затерплими негнучкими пальцями. Сподіваюся, що вистачить надовше. Місто засинає, прокидаються шрами, чорна гусінь. З неї, якщо метелики, то лише мертва голова. Місто пускає пару з ніздрів, наставляє гори, як роги. На дні озера ввижаються обличчя товаришів. Похмура казка дитинства, що справдилася. Хоч і був чемним, поважав старших, задовольнявся малим. Немає насправді ніякої справедливості. Подряпана металева кружка, з якою не розлучаєшся, поверхневий сон і люта ненависть до феєрверків. Міг втратити значно більше, щасливчик, майже цілий. Ти обрав мене, бо маю вмілі й чутливі пальці. В них зручно тримати дрібні предмети. Наприклад, голку. Руда мордочка визирає з твоєї кишені, облизується, згадуючи на смак птаха мого спокою.
The Spartan boy. The war that you've been carrying in your shirt pocket gnawed a hole in you as if it were a fox cub. Your heart keeps falling out. I sew the hole shut, firmly holding the edges together with my numb, unbending fingers. I hope it stays closed a little longer. When the city falls asleep, the black caterpillars of scars wake up, but only death's head moths will emerge. The city pours steam out of its nostrils and sets its hills like horns. You have a vision of your mates' faces at the bottom of the lake, a dark fairy tale from your childhood that came true. Although you were polite, respected elders, and were easily content, actually, there is no such thing as justice. The scratched steel mug you never part with, your superficial sleep, and fierce hatred of fireworks. What a lucky one, he could have lost so much more. He's almost whole, they say. You have chosen me because of my skillful, sensitive fingers. I'm comfortable holding a needle with them. The fox is peering out of your pocket, licking its lips, recalling what my bird of peace tasted like.
So in English, the title of the poem is The Spartan Boy, because the poem is basically using this ancient Greek story, I think by Plutarch, about a boy from Sparta who has stolen a fox cub and has hidden it under his shirt. And when asked if he has taken the fox, he said no, he doesn't have anything, but he hid it to the point, and he had endured the pain to the point when this fox actually gnawed a hole in his stomach, and the boy died. But this is the sign of the strength and the endurance, and it's the same with the burden of wartime experience, which was deeply affecting people, our soldiers who were fighting on the front line. But it's also a metaphor to all of us in Ukraine carrying this experience of war, and it still is, especially when we are traveling to safe countries and where life goes on as usual, and we are carrying this feral animal somewhere inside of us. It's interesting how the idea, the concept of freedom is being deeply reflected on by many different people. For example, there is a prominent historian on Ukraine and Eastern Europe at Yale University, Timothy Snyder, who's a great supporter of Ukraine, and not just through word but through action, fundraising, funds to, for example, to purchase sensors for anti-aircraft systems. He had a great success in that. And his forthcoming book is called On Freedom. And he actually thinks that freedom is a meta value and it's a basis for all other values. They are not possible without the existence of freedom. And it's very, for me, it's very important to find similar ideas that I'm exploring here in my collection. And actually, I think the people over the world in democratic countries, they have got used to freedom so much, so they're just taking it for granted. They cannot imagine that it can be taken away from them. But we in Ukraine, we understand that freedom is a luxury, and now it's an example that the freedom must be fought for and sometimes paid for with a very high price that our defenders are paying right now. Well, this one of the ideas in the book, that the freedom is worth all the fight. Another thing is that many of these poems that I have been writing before the invasion, they have taken on a different meaning. When I read them, they sound very relevant, but they carry the meaning that was not the original meaning when I was writing them. But I think that's also the wonder of poetry, that it can mean different things. It can be read through many different various experiences. And it's also the fact that proves that poetry speaks rather of the future than of the past. So the poems from the collection, before they appeared in the book, they were published in many different journals, I think over 20 journals, and some are forthcoming still. And yeah, we will probably read you one of those that really seem relevant right now, but they were written with a different meaning, and we will read home. I think I'll read it in English.
Right.
You will hear me reading in English a little bit too.
Original also.
Okay. So I'll start with English, and then I can read the original too. So in English it's called Home. I've planted a home for myself in a red flower pot. A place from which I never want to run. A word that melts in my mouth when I say it. A starting point that is marked on every map. A home embraced by trees, branches covering the door. Fantastic beasts wander, pressing against our knees. How did we manage to imagine something so valuable and everlasting in this fragile reality? A clamorous galaxy, a castle bandaged by mist, a dimension with an ongoing quest for the right words. How would we recognize each other under the gloomy sky, each of us pretending to be someone else? Look how our hands and hearts are bruised. Understandable when you must dig yourself out every day. On this earth, a territory of despair, it is hard to stop running even when no one is chasing you. Here we turn on the light above the dinner table. Like a curious neighbor, the mistletoe peeks into our dreams. A train rumbling afar, a TV tower like a white fang. This is your stop. Exhale and then inhale again. So I will read it in Ukrainian too. Виростила собі дім у червоному горщику, місце, з якого не хочеться утікати. Слово, яке тане в роті, коли говориш. Точка відліку присутня на кожній карті. Дім в облозі дерев, гілля прикриває вхід. Звірі химерні блукають, туляться до колін. Як же вдалося у крихкій реальності вигадати щось настільки вагоме й нешвидкоплинне? Галаслива галактика, башта в бентах туману, вимір, де завжди шукають потрібні слова. Як же би ми впізналися під небом захмареним, якби кожен себе за іншого видавав? Бачиш, які в нас руки і серця потовчені, звична річ, коли мусиш видряпуватися щодня. Складно на цій землі, території розпачу, перестати бігти, навіть якщо не наздоганяють. Ось лампа засвітилася над обіднім столом. Як цікаві сусіди, омела зазирає у сни. Потяг дзюркоче. Телевізійна вежа, біле ікло. Це твоя зупинка. Видихни. А тоді знову вдихни. So then I will let Olena read one more of those that were published in the Southern Review. So the home was in the Southern Review and the other one.
Okay. I guess this is our last poem, so. Fear of flying. That evening he pulled a bird from your throat. First, a beak appeared, a sunflower seed, a crested head, as if in a crown, then a feathery neck, wings pressed against its body, perhaps unnoticed. Noticed? Maybe it won't try to fly. And if it does, maybe just close to the ground. The bird spreads its wings, shoots like a bullet, disappears.
Just a short comment at the end. It's very symbolic that it took us one full year of Russia's full-scale invasion, the first one, to translate this book. Now it came to life, and thanks to Arrowsmith Press and Vasyl Makhno, who helped make this book happen, and of course thanks to Olena Jennings. So please give applause to Olena.
Thank you, Yuliya, for your amazing poetry, and thank you, Olena, for the masterpiece translation. You can see that book, most of them for sale, and for that Yuliya signed for everyone who bought that book. Okay, now I will open floor for a Q&A. And my first question to Yuliya, how has changed your poetry within 3 years of the begin war? What will happen in your poetic understanding and viewing of the on the world and around it, that ordinary people, etc., etc. What happened in your poetry?
That's a good question. Thank you, Vasyl. I think for a while I wasn't able to write poetry when the full-scale invasion began, because of course there was shock, there was a need to take care of the most necessary things. But then there's this need of inside every poet to speak up, and there's also a difficulty to find words in such situation. I think I felt that the language, the beautiful Ukrainian language, was not meant to speak of these horrible things. And the first poem that I wrote in I think it was in March of 2022, it was in English.
Oh.
Because I was answering so many messages from friends abroad, from colleagues, mostly in English. And I was trying also to explain what was happening. And when I was writing this poem, I didn't think of it as a poem. It was more of like a note. It was called Safe Place. But when I wrote the last line, I realized it was a poem. It was about the questions that were, of course, the most popular question at the time was, how are you? Are you in a safe place? So these are the first 2 lines of the poem. And it ended with a "Are you in a safe place?" So me asking that person. So the idea was how anyone in the world could feel safe when such terrible things were happening in Ukraine and the international order was crashing down, basically. So, but then I was picking up the words to continue writing in Ukrainian, of course. And the first poems that appeared, they were very basic. I thought that I had lost all of my metaphorical force. They were very simple, very factual. Also, the first ones were quite short. So it was about reassembling the language. So at first I think the language has broken down into not words but even letters.
Yes.
So I was trying to form the words, and then I was trying to build up the sentences to speak about the unspeakable. And then the first poems I call them unpoems. But then gradually I think I've gained quite a lot of my previous style. But this language will never be, my poetry language will never be as it was before. So if you think there's this Japanese techniques of putting together a broken vase using the gold, so I think I picked up my language, but it still has this visible scars. And I've already the manuscript of my new book is already with the publisher and in print, so this will be
Ukrainian?
my new Ukrainian collections. It's called, in English, it will be Stones and Nails.
Mhm.
So it contains mostly the poetry after the full-scale invasion, but also some poems written before. And you can see the contrast. The book will show the contrast between the poetry language of before the invasion and
Yes,
after. It's a
very
very
interesting.
interesting experiment. So it's coming
Yeah.
in the end of May.
Okay, thank you. Question, comments?
I have a quick question about the bird on the cover.
Yes.
And also, thank you very much for the beautiful note about the language, how it was reconstructed. It was very beautifully. Thank you.
Who is the author of that?
Yeah. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about it, because I wanted to speak about it and we didn't have time. So the cover of the English book, or the US edition, is created by the same artist who created the Ukrainian book. Her name is Anastasiia Starko. She is from Tupelo, and this book, the Ukrainian edition of the God of Freedom, it also has very beautiful illustrations in collage technique, and it actually recently got a special award in Italy at the Bologna Book Fair. It got a special award for the illustrations just recently now.
Mhm.
So I asked Anastasiia to create the cover for the US edition. So the book has the similar feeling to the Ukrainian original.
But can you speak more on the metaphor? What kind of a bird is that, or is just a bird?
I asked Anastasiia that
Okay.
question, what kind of bird it is. I think it's better to speak with the artist about that, but the entire idea is the transformation. So the idea of the God of Freedom is how the spirit of freedom transforms a person, how it basically makes an ordinary person do extraordinary things. Just what is happening during the wartime in Ukraine. So this is about the transformation. So this bird, even when it's
Beheaded.
killed, beheaded, it still grows and turns into something maybe different, but still living. And the roots, it shows that it will grow deep.
Some kind symbolic, like death and life.
Yeah, and transformation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you for coming. Thank you for reading. I would like said that Shevchenko Scientific Society celebrates 100th anniversary upon when it first founded, And please save date, May 19, 2024, at the Ukrainian Institute of America, where a scholarly conference will be held from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. The conference will be focused on discussing the society's contribution in the context of Ukrainian intellectual history. Please save the date. Thank you very much. Thank you, audience, for coming, and see you soon. Bye-bye.